So I'm going to take the liberty to go first only because, folks, I'd like to put some historical context to this, which I think will set the stage nicely for Felicia and Kathleen as well. So just a little bit of a brief history about LIRA, the Long Island Recovery Association. Many of you know we were the first ever recovery community organization in New York State. We started back in January of 2000. And one of the things that I tried to do early on was I had this vision about creating a network of recovery community organizations around the state. The only problem was that the state didn't seem to be ready for that vision at that time. So there was a mechanism in place, if you will, through CANIS, the Council of New York State Councils on Alcohol and Drug Dependence. So we reached out to the councils that we knew of through some other contacts, and we were able to recruit a couple of folks to get on board with us. And they tried to get little sort of RCOs going in their area. Sadly, most of them fizzled out. A couple stuck around, but clearly the understanding, the awareness, and the momentum was not there yet to launch this on a statewide level. So we kind of put that in our back pocket as we continued moving forward. So that first winter in February of 2000, we did our first advocacy day, if you will. We didn't call it that back then. It was 35 of us got on a bus in a February snowstorm and went to Albany and did what we now do in mass with 1,100, 1,200 people every year. And shortly thereafter, we had our first victory. We were able to influence legislation that was signed into law that allowed family members to access the insurance benefit for themselves, even if the identified patient, if you will, the person with the active substance use disorder, was not engaged in treatment. So that was a big victory, and it sort of inspired us to keep going. A couple of years later, Oasis reached out to us. They knew who we were because we were loud, like a squeaky wheel. And it was both a blessing and a curse, because while we were able to make some strides, the feedback that we got was, yeah, we know all about you folks on Long Island, but, because we were pushing for statewide stuff, and they were saying, well, then where's the rest of the people from around the state who say they need this too? So they clearly laid out our work for us, right? And that we know came later on with For New York and all that stuff. So interestingly, I was contacted by a representative from Oasis who wanted to give us money to open a recovery center. And I was like, this is like 2003, 2004. And I was super excited, right? And I get on the phone with this guy, Ray, and he wants to give us $24,000 over 4 years, $6,000 a year to open a recovery center, right? Now, I'm of the mindset you never say no to money, but I got outvoted, and our folks thought it was silly. We couldn't even rent a storefront or anything with that kind of money. So we declined respectfully. I think it sort of set us back a while, but nevertheless, that's how things went. And then fast forward 2007, Oasis started the Recovery Service Bureau, created the Recovery Implementation Team. And on that team were a bunch of us, and we ended up working on a couple of different areas. One of those was the development of recovery centers. And then the following year, in 2008, For New York was created, as you know. A bunch of us met in Colonnade Library in upstate New York. 2009, we joined forces with For New York and started the first ever official advocacy day. And my vision, personally, back when we first got started here, was that one day in New York, we would have a recovery community organization and a recovery center, or a combination, in every county in New York State. So that was 2005 or so, right? So I'm very happy to say that today we know there's about 35 of them so far, right? So we're more than halfway there, right? 62 counties, we have about 35. And then specific to Long Island, we got a little mini grant of about $5,000 from Oasis to do some kind of a project with some federal money that came through. And we had a couple of our students who were in Suffolk Community College work on a research survey that we distributed to all the treatment programs and other places that we knew through our relationships with the local LGU, and got feedback. Got almost 600 respondents, and one of the questions in there was, does Long Island need a recovery center? With an explanation of what one was. And then out of nearly 600 responses, 92% said, yes, we need a recovery center. So that's pretty overwhelming, right? A couple of years later, we did another research, this time with over 800 responses. Once again, 93% of respondents said, yes, we need a recovery center. And then our team presented the findings at the Recovery Implementation Team, or RIT, meeting in New York City. So, and then for us, again, more specifically to Long Island, around, I don't remember exactly, 2014 or 2015, Oasis, this was an Oasis idea. What we call now the CBRS meetings, the community-based recovery support meetings, which, by the way, if you don't attend, please make sure that you do. CBRS is the place to be about any and everything having to do with recovery, peer workforce, recovery support services, getting updates from your local, state, county, and federal officials all in one place. You hear what's going on with funding and all of that stuff. So at that time, Bob Lindsay was the executive director for New York, and I told Bob, I said, listen, we have to take this meeting away and make it our own, which is what we did. And then it started meeting in Albany and New York City first by video conference. So a bunch of us would take the train and go to New York City Oasis and participate in the meeting by video with our friends in Albany, and then it expanded. Now there's like 6 or 7 locations and like over 100 people who show up sometimes. So it's really grown, and it's really great. So at that meeting, and this is where I want to applaud Oasis for doing some really good stuff. This is where Oasis started to show a willingness to embrace the participatory process. They asked us to identify what the needs were in our specific regions of the state. We already knew what ours was. If you go back to that research that we did, right? 92 and 93% of respondents, recovery center, the #1 priority. So we coached everybody before each meeting. We had conversations with everybody, and we would parade 12 to 15 to 18, sometimes 20 people from Long Island in there. And every time we did that session about what's the #1 priority, we would hammer home recovery center, recovery center, recovery center, recovery center. So a little bit later down the road, sort of through back.
Access to you. There you go. Okay.
When I heard that so more funding was going to be coming to the recovery center. Can we mute whoever that is?
You can just leave that there.
Okay. Oh, it's Kathleen. Hey, all right. Glad you made it. So when we knew the funding was going to be coming, we were having back channel conversations with some of our friends at Oasis, and we knew that Long Island was going to be in line for a recovery center. So with that sort of off the record information, we outreached to some other friends of ours down here, other not-for-profits that we worked with and advocated with. And I invited them all to join us in submitting an application to get funding for a recovery center. They all agreed. We agreed to put it under the umbrella of a large administrative partner who had the capacity to manage a grant of that magnitude, more so than we did. And then we got the grant. And before you know it, we opened up the center. I think the first year we had over 12,000 people came through the doors. The year after that. We opened up, or a year and a half later, another center in Nassau County. And for those who don't know, Long Island has 2 counties with about 2.9 million people. Each county, one's like 1.3 million, the other one's like 1.45 million. So we have a lot of people on Long Island. And we spent a lot of time when we go to Advocacy Day, like we do every year. And this is some tips for some of the folks up there, to make sure you establish relationships with your local assembly and Senate reps and your county officials as well, because they can get in their ear as well. And not only have we advocated for legislation and bills over the years, that seems to be what most people do, like what bills do we support, but somewhere along the way, we also realized that we have to have an impact on the funding mechanisms here. So we started to incorporate that in our conversations and our advocacy trips. So we would go meet with, say, the Senate Finance Committee. And while we were meeting with them, what we would hammer home to them is, you need to give more money to OASIS so they could do stuff to help us. And we deliver that same message to the Assembly Ways and Means Committee, which is the equivalent of Senate Finance. We would also meet with the governor's health secretary's office and say the same thing there. And then with key Assembly and Senate people, including our own, because each session, the leaders reach out to their members to see what are the priorities for their local areas. And we had a couple of handfuls of Senate and Assembly reps telling leadership, you need to give OASIS more money. And we were very successful in bringing tens of millions of dollars in increases to OASIS over a number of years. And folks, that's a big reason why some of the money is available. And this is a testament to everybody statewide who was a participant in that process and advocacy effort. And we need to continue to do that so that our friends who do not yet have a center are able to get one. So local and state input matters, engagement with OASIS matters, participatory process matters, come to the CBRS meetings, let folks know what your local needs are, and outreach to providers, businesses. We have relationships with so many, the faith-based community. So important to have collaborations. Collaborations are where the funding goes these days. So individual entities don't get the money, you know what I mean? So that's just a word to the wise if you're looking to create a center in your area. And with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Felicia. We'll be glad to answer questions for you folks later. Thanks for letting me give you a little bit of the history. Only means I've been around a long time.
I was just about to say, I am grateful for your vision, Richard, because without your vision and without your advocacy, we wouldn't be here today, serving the community and the people that we serve here in Harlem. And so I thank you. And Kathleen, welcome. It's so good to see you.
Yay, Kathleen, man.
Kathleen made it. You know, you talked about some really key things that I want to continue to thread through who we are at the Pillars. And one that's building a movement. I keep saying I'm like half off, half on. I'm going to try and stay on. It's building a movement through the use of data, right? And how important data was for us to get funding. And so I saw a lot of questions in the chat about funding. And I think that comes through the use of data. So I'll take a half a step back. And for those who may not know, the Pillars was Manhattan's first OASIS-funded recovery community and outreach center, which is mind-blowing to me. I am a baby in this field, and you know, this is partly why I'm so mind-blown when I'm in rooms with people like Kathleen and Richard, because I haven't been doing this for decades, but I had a clear vision as well. And so Richard talked a little bit about collaboration and why that was important to building the RCOC. How we began was with a prevention coalition, which used SAMHSA's framework for that network, right? And having the 12 sectors by our side, which gave us the muscle as we were building the RCOC. We began to just take that same framework and then shift it over to a brick and mortar model. And so at the Pillars, you know, I think I'm blessed a little bit, and what I may have that some others may not is like 30 years in corporate America. And so I built a space that was welcoming. It was beautiful. Although we are in the lower level, I don't say basement, lower level of this commercial building. When you walk in, you just feel like you're in just a beautiful spa and an oasis in the heart of Harlem. And that was very intentional. It was very intentional that I branded it really well and clearly so that the logo that you see behind me could stand on its own, even if you didn't see the word Pillars. It was very intentional that I met with my senator, my assembly person, my council person long before the funding came, because I began to talk about the importance of establishing something like this in the community that I knew was in need of the services. And so that takes me to like the three things that I think are most important for me as I was bringing this forward. Number one, it was the who. Who was I passionate about serving? I knew that I was passionate about serving Blacks in Harlem, the where, right? The who, the where, the why. I am one of them. They are me. I didn't see myself separate from anyone that would walk through the doors. And so those were the things that were really key. But I was lacking some things as well, right? I was lacking the knowledge. I didn't know how to do this. But what I did have was what Richard talked about earlier, was the vision and the faith that I could. And so I wrote this grant to Oasis. And, you know, it's so funny because I didn't think that I would ever get funded. I knew that there were the Phoenix Houses and the Samaritans and the Odysseys that do a really great job at this. So why me? And then I turned that question around to why not me? I know this community. I'm rooted in this community. I am this community. And so why not me? What I was told when I got the call, and I'll never forget the day that I got the call, it was a year after the list had come out of who had been funded, and I was not on it. Not surprised, right? It was a year later. I see Kathleen shaking her head. A year later, I'm like in a nail salon. I'm, you know, basically unemployed, and I'm like, why me? And my phone rings, and I see it's a 518 number, and I'm like, and the words were, I'm calling from Oasis. Are you still ready, willing, and able to open an RCOC? And I was stunned. I leaned against a pole in the mall and just slid down it and cried because somebody believed in the vision that I had laid out on paper. And I want you to understand that no one could have written that vision the way I wrote that vision. And so you, if you are connected to your community in any way that is real and passionate, no one can tell that story like you can. And basically, I just wrote the story from my heart of how I wanted to give some things that I had received because I was privileged. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm in recovery. I was privileged to go away to a treatment center where I received yoga, acupuncture, meditation, Reiki, but I also had really good insurance. And so what I wanted to do was to bring all of those things back into Harlem for people who were uninsured and underinsured, where I saw that there were dozens of treatment facilities, outpatient, medically assisted treatment going on in my backyard, and then people had nowhere to go. That they were congregating on corners because after they picked up their medication, they didn't have any other thoughts about, well, what does this look like now and next? And so I went to the heart of the problem. I advocated for it. I received funding for it. And then I went and put my boots to the ground and told people that we were there. Because you can build it, but if you build it and you don't tell people that you're there, then no, they won't come. So you have to build it and tell people that it exists on multiple levels. You have to put your boots to the ground and go out there and advocate and knock on doors and hand out flyers. You have to call those treatment centers that Richard spoke about earlier and let them know that it's important that they include this recovery center on their discharge plans. You have to let Oasis know through the data how many people have come through the door and why it's important for them to continue to give you the money. The money is short. I will say the money is short, but with the volunteerism, I saw someone on there saying that, you know, they're here and they're volunteering. Thank you for that, because that is some of what gives us the muscle to do what we do. It's the volunteers that come in and do the yoga classes and the acupuncture and the Reiki and the meditation. I could not afford to pay them to do that. And so it's really important to go out and tell people why they too should be passionate about what you have built in the community. And lastly, you must seek funding from other resources, or else you're going to be really struggling and hungry. And so some of the ways in which we did that, we were the first in the state of New York to get the Building Communities of Recovery grant through SAMHSA. You know, you have to continue to mine for sources that will move your vision forward as you tell the story, collect the data, and help the people. So I hope that you took something away from what I added to Richard's amazing story. And so I'm going to pass this baton to Kathleen, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions for you later.
Okay, so thank you so much. I am not Bill Bopp. I am Kathleen Cott-Benny, and I am the Program Director of Foundations Recovery Community Center. Happy to be here. Obviously, a little frazzled here with some technical issues, but you know, we work through these things with the help of others. And Ashton and Jeff, thank you so much. And Teresa, Richard, just asking for help. I'm in trouble. I can't get on, and here I am. So thank you, Felicia and Richard, for sharing. I am, you know, just really honored to be sharing a platform with both of you who I admire, respect, and, you know, go to for advice. It's really an honor for me. I am a woman in long-term recovery. I found my recovery in North Carolina in 2001. And I was living in an Oxford house. And the very first convention was in Washington, D.C. And I sat in the front row where I listened to Miss Pat Taylor from Faces and Voices of Recovery talk about this community and advocacy that I wanted to be a part of. And I had this newfound drive for my recovery, being in a room with countless people and hearing what was happening, you know, what was happening across this country. Fast forward, I come back to New York, I get a job doing something else, I go back to school, and I then see a friend of mine referred me to the Rockland Council on Alcoholism, as they were looking for an office manager. So I applied for the job and I got it, and I was thrilled to be part of this agency that was a prevention agency affiliated with the National Council on Alcoholism and Other Drug Dependence. And the then executive director had this vision for a recovery center or something like it, where she wanted to have an open mic night and coffee. And she said, you know, since you're in recovery, maybe you'd be good to start something like that. So long story short, she resigned. And most of you know, Ruth Bowles then came into the Rockland Council, and she'll tell you, you know, she's a woman in recovery, and that she had, I think, worked with Richard years earlier on some of this very early recovery support services and advocacy efforts across the state, and shared some of those stories with me, and I got excited again and very passionate about what we could be doing. And, you know, years later, so the Rockland Council was part of the Council on Addictions in New York State. And Ruthie was connected with Miss Laura Elliott Engel, who I definitely wanted to share that Laura was active in New York State public policy about recovery from addictions. She was a member of CANIS, Council on Addictions in New York State, and the Finger Lakes Consortium and Alcohol Substance Abuse Services. She was one of the founding members of Friends of Recovery New York, and which is a statewide coalition giving voice to people in recovery from addiction, their family, and allies. And she served as the group's executive director from 2009 until shortly before her death. And I had the distinct pleasure of going to one of her advocacy days up in, I think it was a small little church. There was about 20 of us in Albany on a rainy day, and her and Betty Courier and some other people just inspired me. Ruthie said, just go to Albany and sit in the church, sit in the front seat. And I did. And again, was just inspired. Years later, moving forward, the Anonymous People screening came out, and the then executive director, Bob Lindsay, asked me to organize a bus trip to Albany. And I said, how am I going to do that? He said, create a flyer and get some people on the bus. We need to have a big presence in Washington for October 4th, the Unite to Face Addiction rally. And I actually was able to do that, knowing that there were countless other people from New York attending and across the country attending this, and finally coming out with sharing their stories that we needed more services. We needed a recovery center in every community across this state. We needed family support services. The epidemic was claiming far too many lives, and we needed to speak out. We needed to advocate. We learned about advocacy with anonymity, and we started just developing. I was taking trainings through Friends of Recovery New York, receiving that, technical assistance and bringing it back to Rockland County, where we then formed Friends of Recovery Rockland. I just wanted to back up because I jumped around a little bit, but that screening of the Anonymous People that Laura asked us to host, that this was going to be the first coming out for people in recovery. And it was attended by Laura, drove to Rockland County 3 hours or more to sit on a panel and drove home that night. Courtney Lavelle was a young person in recovery who spoke on the panel. Bud Mkhitaryan, who wrote Many Faces, One Voice, also was on the panel. Deb Rhodes. And I have a picture. I was going to share the PowerPoint, but it was enough for me to just get on here without doing that. But and Ruthie and Mario Dierna, who many of you know, are standing there at Rockland Community College. And people were very interested in joining. So we had that sign-up sheet, and we started to form Friends of Recovery Rockland. From there, I met incredible people with incredible stories who wanted to do something about their situation. They had power. They had desire and commitment to changing services. And they worked tirelessly. We worked. We all, we were in front of, our local legislators. We were at street fairs. We were in parades. I have a picture of us marching in a Halloween parade, the first ever recovery, people in recovery having signs that somebody spoke about, that recovery is contagious and families recover. And we marched. We went to a number of advocacy days up in Albany. We really did a lot. And when the first go round came out for the Recovery Center grant, we actually applied, but we didn't get it. And I remember that disappointment, because I really thought that we were in a position, but we weren't quite ready. We did receive a grant through Senator Carlucci to hire the first 2 recovery coaches in Rockland County. And through that, and Felicia talked about data, we were then were able to show data of the effectiveness of these peers. And we asked many people from different sectors to join us. We started inviting multiple pathways of recovery to the Rockland Council to, share the space. We had plenty of space here, and we invited pathways like Smart Recovery, which there was no Smart Recovery meeting here in Rockland County. We had Families Anonymous and Naranon, and we just started to connect and invite them in. And many of them joined on to Friends of Recovery Rockland. So we were in this position then years later to apply again, and we were much stronger then to apply for this grant. And we were just thrilled that we were awarded to finally build our brick and mortar recovery center. We talked about it, we envisioned it, we knew the importance of it. From that Friends of Recovery Rockland group, we have, a recovery community center now in Rockland County. 2 of our members have now housing in Rockland County. Steve Clement with Rockland Recovery Combs was a member of our group. There's another program, Hope Not Handcuffs, that stemmed from some members of Friends of Recovery Rockland. And it's just amazing to see what has happened in the last, 6 years or so, in a very short time. And Bob Kent said it this morning, what a group of thoughtful citizens can do, committed citizens can do. And I actually do have the quote here. I should quote it right. Actually, I'm going to pass on that because I was prepared earlier today, but never doubt that a group of thoughtful citizens can indeed change the world, and it's the only thing that ever has. And it's really, I've seen it happen, and it makes me emotional to think that, when we were sitting around the table in the beginning days and just thinking that this is what we could have, and this would be helpful, and this could, have an impact on overdose deaths and support people in recovery, and it comes to light, and it's just amazing to be sitting here on this panel with this incredible support from Friends of Recovery New York leading the way, and being part of this now RCOC network. It just really is a testament to collaboration and passion, and I'm really thrilled to be part of it. So thank you. I hope I wasn't jumping all over the place, but again, I'm really happy to be here and excited. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Kathleen, for the reminders there. All right, I think we did pretty good by limiting our contributions, which leaves a lot of time for folks for questions or comments or thoughts. And as each of us think of additional things we might want to add, we will feel free to jump in and share those with you as well. Yes, Karen, couldn't agree more. Kathleen's done a tremendous job down there in Rockland. She was grooming herself for a couple of years and then finally jumped in, spread her wings and soared like an eagle. Absolutely.
I'm reading the chat, people are just so wonderful. They're speaking about our humility, but, what else can we be but humble in this? And for a few reasons, right? I am no different than anyone else who walks through my center. But there's also, it is humbling to know that if, for whatever reason, my funder decides to go in a different direction, this all goes down the drain. So this is not standing on me or my faith or my shoulders, right? This is a collaborative effort in which I get to, behind the scenes, speak with Bill and speak with Kathleen and speak with others in the recovery network to really help move this mission forward. And so I can be nothing but humble in knowing that this movement is young, and this movement still needs voices that are in this room, you know, like Karen's and Alicia, hi Alicia, and Patricia's and Suzanne's, to help us move forward the narrative that we do need additional funding support in order to help move from 35 to 65 recovery centers, where there aren't, you know, dozens of miles of gaps in services, especially upstate New York. And so I just wanted to put that out there on the table.
So I don't know who else saw that in the chat. Somebody asked about a virtual recovery center. Are there any? And not that I know of, but what a great idea, particularly to serve rural areas while we work on putting something together that is more brick and mortar. I just want to speak briefly to follow up on Felicia's comments, because now is the time, for those of you who were in Rob's session this morning, now is the time that we've been able to make major progress on the federal front too the last couple of years. Kathleen talked about hearing Pat Taylor from Faces and Voices of Recovery, and, you know, being part of Faces and Voices for 8 or 10 years and having a firsthand look at how things happen and being part of the conversation there. It's really been the work of us collectively nationwide as well that's been able to influence both policy and appropriations in Washington, D.C. We have people in recovery in the White House now, right, at SAMHSA and ONDCP, that are making decisions. We have an Office of Recovery that's opening up at SAMHSA. It's unbelievable. We've talked about that for years. And then to the recovery center piece again, some of you heard Rob talk about this. We sent out an announcement that in the House and President Biden's budget this year is a 10% set aside from the SAPT block grant exclusively for recovery, right, to fund recovery. So now it got screwed up a little bit because that provision is not permanent. It's only for 1 year. So separately, legislation has been introduced by some of our friends that will make that permanent. But to me, the first thing that I thought of was, well, if this funding is going to be annual in perpetuity, let's get that money and use that pool of money. And I did the math, probably $20 to $25 million for New York to sustain the existing recovery centers into the future, right? What a perfect segue on how to use that money as we continue to, don't forget, $200 million. It's in Oasis's pocketbook already, it sounds like, from Rob this morning. I didn't know we got it all yet. I thought it was coming over a few years. But so there's money out there, and it's your money for your community, and please go ask for it.
I see a question in the chat about, you know, inspiration for building, and this is from Suzanne Cardner. And so I can't speak to how Fountain House built, and maybe Kathleen can weigh in on some of the inspiration for building. Where she is.
I'm sorry. The question is, did you get any of your inspiration from the Fountain House?
Your inspiration come from and how you built what you built?
Oh, so, well, I will tell you that the space that we're in currently is located on the ground floor of the Rockland Council, which is our prevention agency upstairs. And I used to look down here at this vacant space and say that this would be a wonderful recovery center. There were 3 different rooms. And I didn't think there would be a lot of build out, and it was on the ground floor, and it had a private entrance, and it was in the back of the building. And I thought that that would be, you know, important for people, you know, with wanting to feel still private. And, you know, I just knew that we needed offices for recovery coaches, a big room for the center for groups to meet, and with a kitchen and coffee and We have a big screen TV and, you know, a big calendar about, you know, what are events of events of the year, of the month. And then we have another separate room, which I envisioned more for, and we've used it for yoga, more family support, some one-on-one family education and training, etc. So I don't know exactly where it came from. I guess it just came from the recovery community that this is what I knew that we needed. And you know, we did a lot of, we had a lot of meetings around, you know, what things were going to look like. And we're still continuing to build. We like to say here at Foundations that we're building recovery from the ground up. And so we continue to get those, you know, we have surveys and we ask our participants, what do you need? What would you like to see more of? So yeah, it's a combination of just kind of knowing what's happening across the state, which is why the network is really important, hearing how others are doing it, what has worked in the past for other centers, and how we can improve.
Richard, do you mind if I jump in here? Because Kathleen said something that just made my heart swell.
Please, please.
You know, number one, I think it is crucial to understand that an RCOC, a recovery community, is a living, breathing thing. It is not four walls. And so that means that it is always changing. Richard, you gave it a term, right? That participatory action research, right? And that Kathleen just mentioned. I never use an autocratic approach to building what this is. It is, I don't build it from my office and drop it down into a community and hope it works, because it almost never works when I do that. It works when I go out into the community and say, tell me what you need. And then I go back and I find the partners if it is beyond my scope in order to get it done. And so that is how we can give free medical appointments once a month through a partnership with the College of Osteopathic Medicine. That is how I go out and do all these other trainings to learn how to implement parenting skills enhancement classes. That is how we do, you know, art therapy. I am no art therapist, but I went out and I asked them, they said that they wanted it, and then I went out and found who could do it for us and do it on a volunteer basis, which helps to stretch those budgets. And so I thank you both for that, because we are building this while it is flying, because we hope to continue for it to always fly, and that it will always change as it is orbiting this community. So thank you both for that.
Amen. Yeah. Looks like, well, we probably have 20 minutes. What time is this till? 2:15, I think, right? So there's plenty of time, folks. I mean, don't leave empty space here, because, you know, I'll just jump in there and grab it. But no, I'm just kidding. I just will share some additional things if there's a gap. So let me just share this with you. So some of you might be aware, but when we got wind of all this federal money that was coming, and I noticed, and this is, you know, for those of you who know me, I'm critical of Oasis when they need to be criticized, and I also praise Oasis when they deserve praise. So I think they're fair in understanding that I'm not looking to, you know, be a rebel rouser unless it's necessary. However, when we heard all of this money was coming, my question was, well, where's the outreach to our community to see how we might best use this money? So the participatory process is sort of fleeting with Oasis. Sometimes they use it and other times they don't. And they need to use it all the time, because this is our community and your voices deserve to drive the decisions around funding to meet the needs of your local community in your region of the state. So with having said that, what I did was I submitted a list of, because there was a point in time where Oasis had to submit to SAMHSA a list of initiatives that they were going to fund with the money they were going to get. Now, nobody reached out to us and said, well, what do you think we should fund? So I sent them a list. I got the names of all the top Oasis brass who were going to be part of the decision. And I made a list of about 15 different recovery-related initiatives. and sent it to Oasis by email, and then shared it with other people and asked them to sort of add theirs in if it wasn't in there, and then kind of do something with it. So they got that. They got that in time, and now they have the money. So let's see what happens with the money for recovery that's in New York. And we need to continue to ask that question. Rob said it this morning, right? Where's the money? They spent 40 million. Where's $160 million? And if you need some of that in your community to meet the needs of your people, families, and people in recovery, go ask for it, please.
So I'm looking at the chat, and you know, Victoria is talking about NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard, and any suggestions on how to deal with that. I deal a little bit with that, but I'd be curious to know, Richard, I see you shaking your head, and Kathleen, if you're dealing with that, and what your suggestions may be for Victoria, who says that a lot that has to do with money and not in my backyard.
Let Kathleen go first if she has.
Well, I have to tell you that we have not experienced that here in Rockland, and not in my backyard. Like I said, it's a somewhat, you know, it's a private area, but I think that this is in response to a crisis. We've talked long enough. We've done enough. And I shouldn't say enough. There's never enough, but we've, you know, laid the foundation that this is a support for every family in this community that has been affected. And we've shown, you know, I think we've done a lot around stigma. Obviously that's never done, but I haven't really experienced that, not in my backyard. Now I know that, you know, with housing, that's a different story, but as far as with our recovery center, it's been welcoming. You know, we've, you know, connected to our providers and our, you know, legislators. It hasn't been a problem. I'm sorry to, you know, that's all I can add. But Richard?
Yeah, it was a complete oversight on my part. So we experienced a lot of NIMBYism, and I was surprised. I really was surprised. But I think a lot of it had to do with folks not understanding what it is we were trying to do here. So we looked at, you know, the 4 different agencies that together opened up the center. We looked at literally 15 to 20 different properties. We had agreements with 3 or 4 places, all of whom reneged or backed out afterwards when they found out what we were going to use it for. It was so frustrating and such a vivid reminder of the battle that we're still facing here, right? So they had this vision of people strung out on drugs or drunk, hanging out in the building next to their business, you know, just total misunderstanding. And that speaks so much more to how we have to educate our communities about what recovery is and what makes it different, and how having a recovery center is going to help your neighborhood and not harm it. So yes, clearly we could relate to that. And then fortunately, at one point, we had somebody who was willing to take a risk, understood what it was, gave us a shot. And boy, was he surprised when we invited him to the recovery center as the landlord to be in the room when the governor came to sign legislation in the building that he owned. It made him feel like he made a good decision, I'll tell you that. So.
You know, I love that you're speaking about the shine that these RCOCs, you know, place on the faces of other people, who some of whom would not show up when I was calling and asking when this was conceptual, or even after I got the money, but we were just building it out. And so the people were not coming through the doors yet. There was a lot of skepticism in the community. I got a lot of, well, what makes you different from any of the others that are here? Well, there are no others here, right? Because at some point they had categorically placed us along with the organizations that had been here for a long time, proliferating this community for a long time, providing the same level of treatment for a long time. And I'm really trying to be careful with my words here. And thank you for smiling about that, Richard, because you understand what I'm saying. And so we were not like them. And it was a little hard to break through that noise. And secondly, I want to talk about the understanding that gentrification was real in Harlem when I wanted to open an RCOC. And there were people that were spending $1 million, $2 million on a brownstone who did not want a recovery center in their community. And I had to go and stand up and say, it's for people like me. I'm in recovery. Here I am. I don't look so scary, do I? And so I had to reframe the concept of what recovery is by standing up and being that voice and face of recovery in this community. And thank goodness I was willing to do that. So we got some NIMBY, right? I just bought this $1 million brownstone and no, I don't want those people there. Well, I am those people. And secondly, we got it because of the historical proliferation of treatment modalities in this community that led to and still has dozens of people on the street just loitering with nowhere to go, because that's what was placed here in Harlem for decades before we got here. So, you know, we still have so much work to do to undo some of the harms to people in this community that have been here in this community for decades.
I just thank you very much, Alicia. As you were speaking, I was just thinking about the Our Stories Have Power recovery messaging training and the importance of language when speaking out in public about recovery and how that really can make such a huge difference. I encourage anyone to start with some of those trainings, particularly the training of language when they're speaking to the public about recovery, about services, what that looks like. Because I really feel that, you know, it does make a tremendous difference when you say that I'm a woman in long-term recovery, than as opposed to, you know, I'm an addict. Well, what is that? You know, so Friends of Recovery New York I just encourage people to utilize all of the services and the trainings, education, if you're, you know, interested in starting, you know, an RCO or an RCOC, that you tap into all of those critical trainings, because I mean, that's really where it happens. It starts with education for me. So.
Walter Johnston asks in the chat, how do we frame our requests for funding from local businesses or local organizations? And so I have not had a lot of success in reaching out to local businesses or other organizations for funding. However, where I have had some success is reaching out to SAMHSA and reaching out to Oasis for funding. And so framing that request was, number one, framing the problem in the community, right? I knew that last year there were, you know, 135 overdoses that happened publicly, right? That is the problem. That is how I framed the problem. And then I framed the solution to the problem, right? If you use our members as first responders who would be well trained through a curriculum that we developed and have them all naloxone trained and give them, you know, ways to be contacted and they can respond to public overdoses, right? And we need funding to do that. That is how it is important to frame, number one, what the problem, and then to frame the solution. Because if you're only placing a problem on someone's desk without a possible solution, then that can be daunting. You're asking them to come in with a solution for your community, which only someone in your community could really come up with that is going to be effective. That Patricia is saying, Felicia, how do we reach out to minority communities when they may not feel the recovery center is for them? I'm not sure who the they and them are, Patricia. We're all in diverse neighborhoods, but the people who attend our center don't really reflect the community we are reaching. I would really love some additional context if I'm reading that correctly, it sounds like minorities are not coming to the center. If that's correct, and if so, just let me know that I'm on the right track. And so I have not seen your marketing pieces, but do they reflect your community? I think that that's really important, and that's something that we do and we do really well. We make sure that we, I could never say that I have built a center for Chinese immigrants. Although we have Chinese immigrants that come through, I am a Black woman. And so what I claim to do and what I claim to do really well is reach people like me. And I am very adept at that. And so maybe, Patricia, you can hire people that look like the community you are trying to attract to help attract those people. And so the diversity will come in the faces who are behind the scenes, in addition to the ones that come through the door. And so I think that that's really important. Our marketing pieces are reflective of women, Black women, fathers, because that is who we want to reach and talk to, Black fathers. So we will put Black men with children on marketing pieces. So it's just really important to make sure that you have the language and the visuals and the people behind the scenes once they come into the door that reflect who you're trying to attract. Patricia, I see that you're saying that you are Native and African American like me, right? And so again, still, I don't know about your marketing pieces, but maybe we can talk and I'll put my information in the chat and I can show you some of the things that we have done. And you can follow us on Instagram. You'll see like a whole list of things that we've done, and that's pillars.nyc. I'm old. Yes, IG stuff. Pillars.nyc, but I'm putting my information in the chat for you. Other questions, comments? Richard and I did the same thing at the same time.
I was going to say, is it time to fill in some dead space again? Just something else that dawned on me. So some of you know that we're going to be having a new OASIS commissioner. I'm going to share something here with you that I've only said one other time out loud. And the reason we were so successful in getting so much done, and this is not meant in a disrespectful way at all to the commissioner, was because Rob Kent was our commissioner for a few years, unofficially. And Rob is no longer here at OASIS. And the composition of OASIS going forward could be very different. I'm hopeful, as I'm sure many of you are, because the new governor is an ally of ours. She knows who For New York is. She knows who some of us are. Her heart's in the right place. Her family's endured a tragedy. Hopefully she's taking in the feedback that's coming from our community. And we have people and decision makers put in place that'll really help us move the ball downfield here. So I'm hopeful. Really hopeful about that. So let's see how OASIS takes form going forward, right?
Richard, can you give us any context as to how we, the people who are in this field, may be able to put forward names of individuals that we would like to see as the next commissioner? Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, some of you may know a campaign was started that had to be sort of reshaped to protect certain individuals. But There is a change.org petition out there to Governor Hochul about appointing people with lived experience at the highest levels of OASIS, aka including commissioner. So if you have not yet done that, please sign that petition. It's all over Facebook. We have some internal people who we would like to see elevated. And we have to go about that in a tactful, diplomatic way, which we are doing. And there are ways to get those particular names to the people who need to hear them without putting anybody at risk or in jeopardy. So that's where being around a long time helps a little bit, because sometimes our community is like, you know, ready, fire, aim. You know, that's what we do best in our early days. But it's always good to strategize and do things in a way that we think will have the most impact. So I think the goal was to get it to 1,000 signatures. The last time I saw it last week, I think it was about 650 or something. So get that petition, sign it. I put my wife's name on it and told her afterwards I signed her name too. I mean, you know, whatever you got to do. Let's get it to 1,000. And then once it hits that 1,000 level, it has a more significant impact with 1,000 signatures. So that's what I got.
I love that we're asking for someone with lived experience to lead a movement. It is very hard, I think, in my opinion, to do this kind of work just from book knowledge. But it's great when you have a combination of, you know, book knowledge and lived experience when you're heading up something such as this.
Thank you, Ashton. See that update in there, folks? 953 signatures. Let's go. We could hit the 1,000 just with this group here. Ashton, you have that link here somewhere? Can you scoop it and paste it in the chat for people? That would be awesome. There's the link in the chat. Thank you, Ashton. I think I'm going to go in here and sign up my Uncle Johnny that lives in the attic that we don't talk to that often.
Are you voting for Rich Buckman?
Definitely not. But we do have a favorite that we can talk about offline.
Okay.
Right, let's do that. I have a couple. Oh, thank you, Mary. Mary said she signed. Eddie now signed. This is awesome. That's how it works. Carrie, thank
Spread it
you.
around. Share it on Facebook. Let's do what we got to do.
Absolutely. I think we're coming down to the wire. I don't know if we've left anything on the table. I saw that Walter asked, what is the best way to establish inroads into communities that are not being served? So I don't know if either of you have any advice to that for Walter. And Walter, maybe you can let us know what community, where, or what type. Maybe you could just give us a definition into community not being served, because community can mean so many things. It can mean a place, it can mean a people, it can, you know, be religious, faith-based. So, you know, what do you mean by community not being served? Thanks for signing, Karen, and thanks, Patricia Crowley. You guys rock. It lets us know that we didn't put everybody to sleep on here, and that 4 people were in attendance.
At least 3 people were paying attention. That's great, guys. Keep that up. Keep that petition going.
Oh my goodness, Mary loves you, Richard. She says that this was the highlight of the conference for her.
Go, Mary. Not to leave Walter in limbo, and again, more context, as Felicia asked for, would be helpful, but I mean, it's sort of a similar thing for all of us, right? I mean, we start out just with the folks that we know, and we start building outwards from there. So I still say the greatest tool that we've had to recruit people to our movement is the Anonymous People movie.
Yeah.
I've seen people, we've taken it to a center somewhere, had 60 or 70 people in the room, and at the end, people are standing up and talking about, I'm in recovery and I want people to know, and it just ignites people. That's one. Number two is you have to do your networking with the people that you know about who do they know and who is this issue important to, and can we go do a community meeting or a town hall and invite people and do different kinds of things to outreach. Those are some ideas, at least at the basic grassroots level.
Mm-hmm. I'm in agreement with that networking, because whether it's networking with people like me and boots to the ground, people in recovery, or, and I saw a question earlier in the chat, who are the top brass at Oasis? That's not a mystery, right? If you go on oasis-ny.gov, you will see who all the top brass are. And at SAMHSA, right? I would go to DC and I would attend conferences where I knew the funders were going to be. And, I've made friends, and it took me, 2 years before receiving funding to do that, right? But I did it and I showed up. And they knew knew to look out for the grant when it was coming. And like Richard said, I'm a noisemaker. I try not to fight unless I'm but I am a girl from Harlem. So, it's just in me. And I remember the first time I ever had any kind of interaction with Oasis, it was long before I got money. So I thought I would never get money because I called them all down from Albany because they were defunding all of these after school programs all across the state. And I called up 50 after school programs. Did you lose money from Oasis? I had no idea who Oasis was. And I asked Oasis to come down and hear our voices. So I will engage in a good fight when a good fight presents itself, like Richard said, but I am also grateful because without Oasis, I wouldn't be sitting here on this platform right now with this logo behind me and 10,000 people that have come through our doors in a year. So, you gotta find the funding and make yourself known before the funding finds.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I was just again looking at the picture of Laura Elliott Engel on my screen and just thinking about, what they must have thought about. How are we going to have this far reach? How are we going to, mobilize the entire state of New York? And I know just for me, for the county, when I was asked, get the recovery community, start a recovery community organization. I'm like, well, how do I do that? And the answer was one person at a time.
Yep.
And I continuously say, when I feel like I need to, reach an entire community, it's one person at a time, one champion from that community, being welcoming, all inclusive in the work that we're doing and learning, developing, continuing to be educated, and knowing what the needs are by sitting in on some of these, collaboratives and meetings, hearing where are the pockets of the community that may be being underserved, and how can we, reach out. But it takes, time, energy, communication, and all those things. And glad to be in the process, like you said. This is ongoing and continuous, and we'll just continue to grow and get better. So thank you.
Amen. Thank you. So folks, I see it's 2:14 with major thanks to Felicia and Kathleen for your significant contributions and wisdom. Thank you so much. We're going to turn it back over to Ashton, who's going to, I guess, sort of put a bow on this for everybody. Thank you folks for coming. And remember, every voice counts, and go get your money.
And thank you for the vision, Richard, because without your vision, none of us would be here.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
I don't know how to follow all that. That was absolutely fantastic. That was great. That was an excellent conversation. Kathleen, I'm so happy we got you on. That it was a journey, but you know what? We got there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for everyone that attended and asked some awesome questions.